Hello and welcome to today's Thought Leadership episode. My name is James Martinez. I'm the Assistant Director for Outreach at the MBA program in the Maryland Davies College of Business at the University of Houston downtown. We want to thank you all for joining today's episode. Our guest today is Mr. Randy Volkin. Randy Volkin has recently worked in roles such as Vice President for Business Systems. He's been a Director for Information Services, as well as a Manager for Midstream Services. He currently works as the Chief Information Officer for Perry Homes and also works with the University of Houston downtown as a Corporate Fellow in the MBA program. Let's welcome our host for today's episode, the Dean of the Maryland Davies College of Business, Dean Jonathan Davis. Dean Davis?
Well, thank you for that introduction, James. I am here once again, happy to be here with Mr. Randy Volkin of Perry Homes, who's going to engage with us in a conversation of the likes we want to have and promote to our students and community and our staff around important topics that are facing businesses and organizations today. And the one today is one that just keeps coming up. I almost can't have a conversation with anybody about any topic without eventually circling over to this issue. So it's one we want to revisit as time goes on and things change. Randy, of course, as you've heard, is Chief Information Officer for a major construction firm, and so has a particular operational point of view on how the technology is impacting us, especially with AI and how we implement it. And our interest here in the college is to really talk about how we can engage with the technology in order to drive value in the marketplace. So thank you for joining us, Randy, and look forward to our conversation.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it, Jonathan.
I have some questions here that we may range beyond them, but just as some prompts, I'll start with those questions. Okay. And then, of course, we'll take questions from the audience later on. I'll start in with the first one here, which is around industry adoption. And from your perspective as a technology leader, and particularly in this construction and home building sector, how is the industry approaching artificial intelligence overall?
Yeah, it's also a subject that comes up quite a bit, and hardly a day goes by where we're not talking about artificial intelligence at Perry Homes. And so every home builder is going to be different. At Perry Homes, we're a 60-year-old company. Actually, we're going on celebrating our 60th year this year. And so as a company, as a private organization established here in Houston, we have long-standing processes that have been hardened over many years. And so for us, we wanted to take a very deliberate and measured approach to adopting it. We wanted to make sure that all of our practices and services that have been improved over time, we're not introducing risk to those things and bringing harm to the organization. So our intent was to be very deliberate about our approach. And for us, we started with where a lot of people start. We started with what are productivity improvements that we can bring to our employees, things like how do I craft better emails, how do I make better presentations. We started with how do I make changes to our software development processes. Gen AI is actually making a huge improvement into the speed and quality at which software is being developed in an organization. And we focused a lot on marketing copy. These are things that generally take a long time, producing images and overall text that support the home buying and selling process. And the reason we started with those are because they're human-aided processes. Mm-hmm. You would look at the output from Gen AI, and if you didn't like what you saw, you could disregard it and go about your business as you otherwise would. So very low risk, easy to adopt. So we started there, and as time progressed and we got experience and more mature capabilities, we evaluated a lot of commercially available software. A lot of them were resulting in success, some of them not so much. We developed a lot of our own AI models. Again, some of them developed some success for the organization, others presented additional challenges, but each step of the way, we took a measured approach of adopting it and learning from what we did.
So as part of this measured approach, did you essentially green-light the use of technology for one of those purposes in sequence? And did you build structure process around that to make sure that something didn't go off the rails, or how did that work?
Well, it's very important as you do this, you put guardrails in place, right? There's very important guardrails from a security perspective. So one of our guardrails, for example, is we don't want to put any customer data into any of the AI we're using. Even when all the security measures contractually and conversationally are in place to protect that data, we don't want to expose our customers to any risk. So as we started adopting AI, we put increasing barriers to making sure we were doing the right thing for the customer.
So checks and balances of some sort. along the way. Yeah. Well, so as you were exploring this technology, a lot of organizations will start with those very isolated pilots. What distinguishes sort of a piecemeal approach from a more enterprise approach when thinking about this technology or rolling it out?
I'd like to say that, a lot of people can use technology and put it to place. Probably many of the students here at the university come out of their degree programs ready to apply various types of technology, including AI. Applying technology in an enterprise introduces a lot more complexity. You have to do it in a way that ensures supportability. You have to do it in a way that ensures security. You have to do it in a way that supports maintainability of the software. And that's hard to do in a consistent way across an organization. If I maybe illustrate a couple examples, one in which you have companies that allow the distributed adoption of AI and very few checks and balances in the process. Mm-hmm. You end up with a democratized approach in which lots of individuals in different teams may be creating their own solutions and put it into practice. Up front, that will generate a relatively high return on investment. You see a very high value come out of those initiatives, but over time, that degrades because those solutions aren't easily integrated. Those solutions are hard to upgrade and replace over time as the organization may change or technology may come into the fold. And so while you may have high adoption and high value early, you're not building a sustainable program. On the other hand, what we've promoted and what a lot of organizations like to do is put those guardrails in place first. Have governance programs to make sure you're focused on the right value propositions up front, the right projects at time, and do so in a supported way. So while you may start off with a lower volume of initiatives and a lower value threshold, those solutions are able to be leveraged and enhanced over time so you grow into a more sustainable long-term adoption framework.
Do you give, what kind of effort do you give in terms of spreading out the wealth of the benefit, right? So, because I can imagine in a more individualized, greenlit approach to AI, you could see hotspots of high productivity where a particular person or group of people have adopted this technology and then taken it someplace valuable. Yeah. But it doesn't necessarily the tech transfer doesn't necessarily happen to the rest of the organization. So do you have thoughts about kind of the spreading the wealth or not?
I do believe in the democratization of technology. I think that's, whether you're an IT professional with a pedigree from a university with an advanced degree in technology, or whether you come from one of the business programs, there should be controls that allow you to put in place technology to make your processes better and to yield the returns that you want to achieve in that role. But again, I try to focus on, are those solutions sustainable, and are those solutions secure for the whole company? And so that takes some oversight, and that takes a governance framework in which you have to have consistency across your organization. If you just open things wide open and you just allow everyone to use any technology or any approach to solve a problem, you can end up with a lot of organizational challenges that are difficult to unwind.
So what are the risks that you see for the organization or perhaps tactical risks for individuals or groups using this technology?
There's two that stands out, and they get understated in the marketplace today. Two really careful things to keep an eye on. One is you got to make sure your data quality is capable of consuming that. We initiate a lot of pilots that look good in a demo. They look good when a sales professional will share you that. They look good in a video or a feature set that you may see online. But you need to have a very specific type of data and a very specific breadth of data for those solutions to really work on a consistent basis in an enterprise level. So we make sure we pilot everything with our data. I think data security is a huge challenge right now. There's a lot of risks in how AI will consume corporate data and potentially expose that data or derivatives of that data to people in organizations or outside parties that might not have access to that data otherwise. And so having guardrails in place and being overly cautious about these things is really critical right now.
So in and amongst those risks and challenges that you have to be careful about, there have to be substantial payoffs to make it all worth it. I'm thinking about our audience, and some people in our audience are going to be very familiar with at least the generative AI piece of AI, and may not be surprised by all the things it can do. For those who aren't, do you have an example or a story from your experience where an audience member is going to be really surprised that there's some way to leverage this technology to do something they couldn't imagine?
Yeah, so at Perry Homes, I'll say we're heavily focused on the customer experience, always kind of pushing the boundary of taking what is otherwise a fairly complex and high friction experience, building a home, moving into a home, and making it very approachable and making people comfortable with that experience. Visualizing your home has always been a complicated task, and it used to require very expensive software and very unique individuals to put together 3D models so you could see what a home with very specific features might look. If you want a specific kitchen with a countertop and a particular backsplash, it's hard to visualize these things when you're at your local box store and seeing these things back and forth. And we used to put very robust 3D models together that were time-consuming and difficult, but helped to visualize these things. Now you can use tools from Google, and others have similar, where you put in a prompt that will highlight what a home would look like and the amenities and even a floor plan, and have near-time and instant walk-throughable models of what that home could look like long before it's even built.
That's amazing. And the result is high enough fidelity that they're happy with the end result based on the model that the AI creates.
It is. And so you have to be a little bit careful about some of the nuances of the detail. The technology is still catching up a little bit there, but if you're looking for a good enough look at what a home is going to look like, I think it's a great thing that anybody can do.
Nice. So I know that you used to be in oil and gas in a previous portion of your career. Do you? It's been a while, but do you have some sense of how these technologies might apply there that could be different from, or maybe it's the same? Maybe it's the same kinds of opportunities.
It's really the same, I think, across any industry. I would highlight the framework is the same at how you want to identify and find these things. The order of magnitude in some of these industries, specifically oil and gas, is different. So at Perry Homes, while we may build 4,000 or 5,000 homes a year, there's opportunities to analyze data and do analytics at that volume of data, and certainly at slightly more granular views of things. In oil and gas, you're often dealing with sensor data at the second level over many years or even longer to analyze the characteristics of well performance. And there's very complicated and large data sets around seismic and geography in which you're building much more complicated interpretations and algorithms around how the AI needs to analyze data. But fundamentally, the model is the same. You want to understand what your problem is. You want to identify the value proposition of how that's going to result in some sort of outcome. And then you want to measure that value proposition until you develop the final solution. So there's the order of magnitude of those things may be different, but the opportunity, I think, is really similar, and the application of it is similar.
So I can imagine the devil being in the details, right? Where you've got differences in scope, which you mentioned, and size, but also differences in the particular application. I can imagine, oil and gas is going to be different than construction, and the size of the organization matters. So how do you make sense of the decision to create, curate, specialize a tool in-house versus look externally to find an existing generalized or specific package on offer?
Yeah, it's a good question. Historically, the decision-making criteria has been if you could find a commercially available solution that met roughly 80% of your needs, you would buy that. You would avoid the risk of developing something yourself and sometimes the long time it would take to prove success. Now,
You're talking pre-AI.
Pre-AI. Yeah. And that may have been influenced by areas that you have competitive advantage, right? In those areas, you might have been more prone to developing something yourself. I think with AI, that long-standing ratio is being challenged. For one, because the cost and the risk associated with developing your own proprietary solutions is dramatically being driven down. AI being used to develop software has really changed the game in software development. And so companies are now able to develop things with quicker turnaround time, with higher quality. And then the second part of that, I think that's important to know, there's a lot of change in commercially available AI solutions right now. So what might be a best of breed solution I could buy right now, a market leading product that I would invest heavily in and get up and running, 6 months from now, it might be very different. That company may be acquired, they may be sold off, or they might have come up with a new version that requires heavily investment and the time to change those things. So I think the trend is towards companies doing more proprietary and internal work. And I think that trend will continue for several years than what used to be the historical measure of kind of that 80-20 rule.
That's an interesting phenomenon. It's almost circular, where the AI seems to be lowering the barrier of entry to a bespoke solution.
Yeah.
Using itself, hadn't considered that. So that's an interesting outcome.
Yeah, and in the marketplace, the initial trend was that software developers, or the initial hypothesis was that software developers are being replaced by AI. And to a certain degree, there's some reality to that, as these models are very good at authoring and finding problems with code. But as that trend has picked up, what we're seeing is software developers still play a very important role in that life cycle. And now there's more of those projects happening at companies. So that demand and that pipeline is now there, and it's actually being reinvigorated just with a slightly different skill set.
Interesting. You mentioned earlier a little bit about data, and I can imagine, based on what I know of these tools, they're still susceptible to the garbage in, garbage out phenomenon. So if an organization, a listener is thinking about employing technology, how do they get AI ready? How do they make sure that the data that they're bringing to bear on with these tools works and matters?
Yeah. I think that from what I observe and in my experience, the people that are getting AI right now are not getting AI right because they're really good at applying AI. They're getting AI right because they were very disciplined in their approach to data over a long period of time. And that data discipline hasn't really changed. There's just a bigger light being shined on it right now. And so data quality is easy to say. It's very hard to achieve. And it's not always a technology problem. In fact, it rarely is a technology problem. Where you have bad or inconsistent business processes, you have bad data that results from it. You have good and consistent business processes, you often have good data that results from it. So if you have an organization with maybe not disciplined leadership, and you have business units that may operate in different ways or deliver different products and services using different processes, oftentimes you're going to end up with a very fragmented and disparate data set that's going to be difficult for AI or a lot of other technologies to consume. And so from an adoption perspective with AI, there's always a interest in jumping right in the technology and doing the fun aspects of the project. But an important step is to evaluate the standards that you have, your SOPs within your company, to make sure you have good operating processes and the resulting data set, and do the hard work that needs to be done up front to make sure you operate in a consistent way, you have the right systems and processes in place that result in good data, and you have good mechanics to monitor that data quality over time, and you're going to be much easier in your journey in adopting AI.
So that's an interesting answer, and it's a very fundamental answer. It sounds like companies, it's not a panacea. The technology is not going to solve a foundational problem of data sufficiency, data stewardship that was already present.
Right.
And so the hard work still needs to be done at the foundational level.
Absolutely. And that's what requires a lot of leadership, a lot of change management discipline, and a lot of the difficult decisions that need to be made at organizations about getting ready for what's coming.
Well, that leads me to down another path, which is, a lot has been made of the potential for new technologies to change employment, change what organizations need out of employment, maybe even have the same work done with less employment. I mean, that's been a theme we've heard over and over again. You're talking about an issue that requires great employees following great procedures that are embedded in the culture that create an excellent foundation and a base by which to employ the technology. Do you see the employment needs of the organization changing more toward that, or how do you see that unfolding?
There's nothing more valuable in an organization than a real strong leader that can provide clarity to an organization and drive good business processes. And I think we're not in a position to be talking about AI replacing that skill set right now. And I think, as people are graduating with their degrees from the university here, the specific knowledge, domain knowledge that you have, it can and it likely will be replaced at some point, if not already, then in the near future. What can't be replaced and may never be is the ability to make really good decisions and interactions and change human behaviors. So much like the example I provided before on software development, we've seen radical changes to the software development lifecycle and what it takes to develop software. In many cases, pretty large numbers of productivity improvements being made to people performing that role. But outside of a handful of situations that might be overhyped around high-tech layoffs around software development, the demand is still there for those roles. Mm-hmm. They're just taking on a different form. They're managing the AI. They're there translating user requirements. They're there making sure the programs work as desired. They're just not authoring the code in the same way as before.
So with all that in mind, and speaking probably to our audience who will have interesting questions later, I imagine, how would you advise us graduates of the Maryland Davies College of Business or really anywhere to make sure that they are AI future ready new employees, right? They're ready to engage with the technology. They're providing value to the organization. What comes to mind when you think of that question?
The time-tested value of being a lifetime learner, I don't think has ever been more relevant than it is right now. I can't think of a more relevant message to say that things are changing very rapidly right now. What worked at organizations 6 years ago is not working right now. And so I owe a lot of my success I've had over my career of continuing to invest heavily in myself and what I need to know to get the job done. As you guys are exiting your degrees and going out and working your jobs, you haven't achieved what you need to achieve in your career yet. You need to continue investing in what it takes to learn. And I think the opportunity that everybody has is there's never been a better time, I think, in which the playing field has been leveled between people entering the marketplace right now and people that have been well established there for a long time. Because processes and technology is changing so rapidly right now. Me with 20 years of experience in technology is almost irrelevant. If I haven't stayed focused on what's changed in the last 12 months, then what I learned, between 5 and 20 years ago doesn't apply to how I work today. And so I look at people coming out of college with a tremendous opportunity to apply things and catch up to the future generation in a way that might not have been the case 10, 15, 20 years ago.
That's I love that answer. The pace of change creates the need for what we call in the business spaces, we call it lifelong learning. And it's part of our mission to provide lifelong learning throughout the career of a person who's going to face those sea changes that are constantly kind of coming at us, both from technology, but also from process and government and the world politic. And
I think you have to approach. I know there's probably a lot of anxiety about what the marketplace is going to look like in a few years, but I think university graduates now are at a distinct advantage to maybe prior generations and being ahead of that curve and bringing some new information to the table.
Nice. So I know that in all of these initiatives that you might be talking about, it's never something that IT does by itself.
Right.
Most of our audience, some of our audience will be IT people, but many of them will not be. How do those other parts of the organization need to collaborate with IT to make projects work and to deliver value to the organization?
What we do at Perry Homes is before we start any initiative, whether it's AI or anything else, we just view AI as another investment a company can make. But what we do before we start any initiative is we charter it. So a charter is either a discussion or a written document that has the objectives of what you're going to accomplish. It has the levels of investment you want to make to achieve those objectives. And it has, most notably, what outcomes you would expect to yield from making those investments.
And that comes from IT, or it comes from the business unit that needs it?
We view that as a collaborative relationship between a business unit and IT to agree on how the project will be executed. And I think most notably, once there's agreement on what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, and what the results are expected, we partner with our business units incrementally throughout a project to have a steering team. So a leader from the business will sit at the same table with a leader from IT alongside the project team and take a measured approach to looking at, are the objectives being met? Have we changed the scope of what we're doing? Are the results that we expected to achieve at this point being achieved? And both the business and IT is responsible for course correction or adjustments. Rarely in a technology initiative do you not have to make course corrections through the duration of the project. There's always things you're going to learn and be exposed to throughout. And our objective is to pull those as early into the project and make those as visible as possible early. And so we do those through discussions between all business units and the technology department as the project is executing.
Okay. Well, but at the beginning, at the front end of this whole process, somebody has an idea about a technology need, some problem they want to solve using technology in a way that they haven't before that's going to involve a project. The go or no-go decision is going to hinge on something, right? It's going to hinge on outcomes, ROIs, KPI, something that says, hey, this is worth it for us to do this instead of the other 10 different things we could be doing.
Right.
And then along the way, you have got some way, I imagine, of evaluating whether the payoff actually happened. So how do you view that issue?
So every company is going to be different. I can share a little bit about what Perry Homes does, but depending on where a company is in their growth cycle, they may have metrics around EBITDA, revenue growth, perhaps changes to productivity or improvements to productivity employees. We value our customer experience very high, and we have multiple ways of measuring that. We also value our build quality as one of our most important metrics. So the first step of the process is understand what's unique to your company and what the leadership team and the core strategy of the company is trying to measure. All levels of investment, whether it's an AI initiative or you're building a new plant, need to be tied to measurable KPIs that are grounded in what's unique to your company. And that needs to be written in that agreement to fund the project. The other dimension here is not everything that results in a positive outcome should be done. You have to prioritize things that move the needle the most. You have to look at things that are closest to where your core strengths are, what your competitive advantages are, and focus as much effort as possible on where you can make a difference. And so there's the dimension of what the KPI is, what the metric is for your company. And then there's that dimension of how much focus you want to have on executing a few projects with a high degree of success or maybe spreading things out a little bit more.
Yeah, so I'm hearing you talking about the fundamentals again, which is great. We're back to what is the strategy? What are you good at? What's the experience you're delivering to customers in the case of Perry Homes, and then tying the technology to that. Which is great to remember. The technology is not an end unto itself. It's a means by which you do something that has value beyond that.
It's an enabling capability of what should be a business-focused investment.
So sometimes, perhaps many times, perhaps almost always, there's a payoff. Do you have any wisdom to share, stories to share about when you went down a path and it just didn't work, it didn't pay off? What do we need to know about those moments?
it's common in AI. There's a lot of hype around the products and the capabilities that are in the marketplace. There's a lot of money at play right now, and so anytime there's a lot of money, you have a lot of solutions that are coming to the marketplace. There's widely publicized studies that occurred last year that said somewhere in the order of magnitude of 90% of Gen AI projects are failing. There's another one that came out later last year that put that number somewhere in the 80 percentile range. The reason these are failing are a couple reasons. One is the expectations of results are sky high. And while there is a positive return for many of these investments, there's also a lot of work and time that goes into it. And ultimately, the payoff is failing to meet the high expectations in the marketplace right now. It's not as simple as laying ChatGPT on top of your business data and expecting to be able to ask it questions. There's a lot of discipline that goes into building a solution that would work. And so our approach is to pilot solutions. And so no matter how confident or how many people we talk to that have adopted a particular technology with success, we evaluate it before we make a commitment. We get people that will consume it in a room with the technology, and we have practices around making sure it works for us and with us. And we measure the outcome of that and try to be very, very deliberate about the expectations through there. There's been a number, probably wouldn't be fair to pick on a couple vendors, but there are a number of solutions out there, probably the majority of them that haven't met our investment criteria that we've worked through.
So you're talking about modes of failure. When those failure modes happen, do they typically arise because the sold benefit never materializes, or it does materialize, but the inputs were just too high? We didn't think it would be that much work to get to that good outcome.
I mean, we see a healthy mix of both.
Okay.
We definitely do. I think it's universally accepted that the amount of inputs, the amount of work that it takes to get your processes right, to get your processes changed, to get your data cleaned, and to apply the appropriate level of security, can and often is significantly more than the expectations of starting those projects. And so that's probably a universal that you can apply. But the other is true, which is the expectations are really high, and that can be managed up front. But you have to be very deliberate about what the expectations are when you make those types of investments.
Calibrate those expectations to realistic, real world possibilities and consider the inputs. Yeah. So, well, thank you. Those are some great answers, given us a lot to think about. I want to make sure we give our audience time to ask their very specific good questions that they have been percolating on, hopefully all this time. So I'm going to turn it over to our team. Sarah, do you have any questions from the audience for our guest?
Yes, we do. All right. So the first question is, we talked a lot about AI. What human skills matter most in the age of AI, and what can't AI do effectively at work?
Let's start with a human skill. I think adaptability is incredibly important right now. The pace of change that we've talked about, that everybody is aware of, is changing dramatically. It's not uncommon to start with one hypothesis on how you need to solve a problem, and accepting that those circumstances change as you're working through it. It's a hard skill to do, but being open-minded about things that you may experience that are different than you think, that adaptability is most important. What was the second part of the question again?
What can't AI do effectively at work that human skills can fill?
I think there's an increasing ability for AI to make really good decisions, but I think you have to be careful about the level of risk you want to accept in those outcomes. And so for us, we're not willing to compromise on maybe 10% bad customer experience with AI giving a customer an answer about something. So while it may do a really good job about answering a question 90% of the time, the other 10% may be incorrect. And so that human judgment and how to communicate and answer questions and be highly professional in the process is still really, really an important skill.
Awesome. Thank you. So the next question is, how do AI practitioners fit into your organization? And are they primarily internal experts guiding teams or external consultants customizing solutions?
I have a I have a cautious approach when using external consultants. I mean, the opportunity of using somebody outside your company is that you can often move quicker towards a particular outcome and have somebody that's ready-made to plug in and work on something. But ultimately, those individuals leave at the end of the project or whatever is being put in place, and technology can never stop. You have to put in place lasting measures of these things. Personally, I'd much rather invest in the individuals in my organization, building something, knowing that there's maybe a slower learning curve to getting there, perhaps sacrificing other initiatives to prioritize things that need to be done, but you end up with lasting solutions and people that are more invested in the outcomes. So my preference is typically, especially in areas of competitive advantage that AI is making a practice in, investing in employees that are going to be with the company through the end of the solution.
Great, thank you. So do developers need to be more integrated into business teams as proprietary tools grow? And how can people prepare for that shift?
100%. It's probably the most important skill that we look for when bringing on new team members to our organization. The relationships that we have with our business users, and in many cases our direct customers that are buying and looking at homes, is something that we value at all levels of the organization. So there's many examples where software developers are paired up with individuals within the finance organization, within construction, within our various teams, and working side by side with them. In fact, almost even part of those teams themselves in developing the outcomes.
Great, thank you. If a graduate student in this audience wants to work at the intersection of business and technology, what should they be doing today to stand out?
I think a lot of it is building relationships and learning how to communicate effectively. I feel like a lot of people feel like they're communicating effectively in what they're trying to achieve, but there's always room for improvement. And so always assessing what your relationships look like and how you can make them better is very difficult to achieve and involves a lifetime of learning and self-evaluation. So I focus on your communication skills and the ability to influence and listen to others.
All right. The next question is, as a CIO, what does your personal system look like for staying current? What sources, communities, or habits keep you sharp?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. I would say, you have to be cautious about everything you're reading online right now. So I hesitate to endorse one source or the other. I think you have to be good at consuming conflicting information from a lot of different sources and then using good judgment. There's a lot of hype in the marketplace right now. And so, you can't just rely on the stuff online. I've found a lot of success, human-to-human interactions around the city of Houston. Houston's a great city with a lot of cross-company and cross-industry collaboration. I think getting in the room, having lunch, having some of these after-hours events that take place with people from in your industry or outside and having some of those interactions, hearing people that are actually doing the work and have no vested interest in maybe over communicating the results that they've achieved has been important.
Thank you. And this is the last question we have. At a macroeconomics level, do you think the rise of AI will lead to greater wealth disparity?
I don't know if there's a couple ways of looking at this, right? And there's people on one end of the spectrum that may have think, we've hit the bubble with AI and maybe the potential of what things are going to look like over time has been reached, and that bubble will soon pop. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have a number of individuals, very influential, that think within 2 or 3 years, there's going to be widespread changes to the economics and human interactions that we see across the world. I really don't know. I spend a lot of time thinking about this, and I think you just have to put the things that you can't control out of your mind and just focus on what's in front of you. And what you can control is your ability to learn and stay current, your ability to stay valuable in the current marketplace, and your ability to take care of yourself and those around you. There's always been technology or other influences that have dramatically changed the world in ways that was hard to predict. I think this is just something you have to take one day, 1 week at a time.
Thank you. Those are all of our questions from our audience.
Great.
Well, so as a follow-up, in the realm of things that our students and our audience members can control, do you have any thoughts about technology preparation? So we've got a long history, and I'll speak specifically about business degrees, of providing a certain set of technology experiences leading up to graduation and preparation for those jobs. And often they've come in the form of, SQL coding, database familiarity, general technology, Excel, word processing, things like that. Do you have a sense right now of how those needs for organizations are changing and how the students might need to be prepared in the future to be successful?
The most important thing that you learn of all those things that you mentioned is how to learn these things, right? And so I wouldn't focus on any one particular skill set. I would focus on how individuals may learn the best and take control of that themselves. Don't wait for their organizations, whether it's their boss or some committee within their company, to identify those skill sets. I think if you're at a company, you should be able to look around and find the problems that need to be solved. And if you're not doing that, you're probably looking hard enough. Find the problems that need to solve, then go acquire whatever skills you think are necessary to do that. There's an amazing opportunity in the world right now to just learn anything through a variety of methods almost instantly. You don't have to go to a library anymore. You almost don't even have to Google it. The information is available. You have to identify you have to take responsibility for identifying what needs to be learned, and then you have to actually go do it. And that requires discipline and a constant focus on improvement. And I think more than any particular thing I would identify, I'd really focus on that aspect.
Back to the continuous lifelong learning we were 100%. Talking about earlier. Yeah. Well, that's a good full circle to bring this conversation to a close. I want to say thank you very much for joining us and providing your wisdom in this area, which, it's a real challenge to address because it is a sea change in how we interact with technology, what expectations we have of it, how we plan organizationally around it. We've had one event around the sort of the fundamentals of this technology last year. Today, we're having a good conversations about how organizations deal with, employ, plan around, think about this technology. And I won't be surprised if we continue having conversations around this technology that delve into different aspects of it or how it's changing, because it's just changing so quickly. And having this conversation 6 months or a year from now, it might look a little different than it did today.
Absolutely.
So once again, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to our audience for all of those great questions. And before we close, I just want to mention upcoming on April 8th, we're having a special version of the final leadership series event that we're having this semester. And it's going to be around entrepreneurship, and it will be an in-person experience on campus. And we have 3 great guests who will be announcing soon. And I look forward to having that conversation and more to come. So thank you very much for joining us.